Hello. Hello and welcome. Welcome to you all. It's so good to see so many of you here. I know it is a busy time of year and it suddenly got dark and wet and you all came anyway, all for the love of poetry. So thank you so much. It's my privilege to welcome you here on behalf of Gordon College, the Center for Faith and Inquiry, and the Prinsmere Writers Series. My name is Paul Brink and I direct CFI. But I work closely with people all across campus, not least Lauren Colt from the events team, also with the folks in the English department and all sorts of folks from all over campus. So I'm grateful for them. Today's lecture and reading is part of our continuing series of CFI events, which will continue throughout next semester as well, taking place all on the theme, on the questions around beauty and justice, and how these beauty and justice fit together, how beauty allows us to imagine justice, how justice supports the creation of beauty. These are challenging and wonderful questions, and I am grateful to Abby for thinking about these questions with us today. I'm going to invite Dr. Harkaway Krieger to introduce Abby in just a few moments. I did want to mention our next public lecture, which is the Franz Lecture, which is sponsored by the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. That's taking place January 29th, so this is next semester. Our speaker is Dr. James Taylor, who many of you will know. He and his wife together direct the semester in the Balkans. And he will be speaking at that point. Don't have a title yet, but it's coming. I look forward to seeing you there. Carolyn.
It's wonderful to be with you all. As Dr. Brink said, I'm Dr. Harkaway Krieger. I teach in the English program, and it is my great joy and delight to introduce Abby Carroll. I want to start my introduction by reading a brief quote from Thomas Merton on contemplation. Merton writes, "Contemplation is the highest expression of our intellectual and spiritual life. Contemplation is that life itself, fully awake, fully alive. It is spiritual wonder. Contemplation is spontaneous awe at the sacredness of life, of being. It is gratitude for life, for awareness, for being. Contemplation is a vivid realization of the fact that life and being in us proceed from an invisible, transcendent, and infinitely abundant source. Contemplation is, above all, awareness of the reality of that source." And I would like to suggest to you all tonight that Abby Carroll is a contemplative poet. Her poems reveal an attentive presence that is, as Merton says, fully awake, fully active. And her poems show us things, quote, going about their holy work. And that is from her poem, I See the Name of God. Abby captures glimpses of things in their full God-honoring reality. And she does so by being a really good poet. She manages to capture so many different things. I'll give you an example by moving her lines around the page. You guys, okay, I'm just gonna be a professor for a minute. Do you see how the lines move around? That does something. There's something about how this poem captures a God-honoring reality by how the lines move around and which words show up where. She captures the God-honoring reality of the things she's describing through her surprising opening lines. Professor Mark Stevick was just talking about that in screenwriting, where he talked a little bit about the opening to Abby's poem, Matins, "Then will I weave." Why then? What is the poem responding to? What is it following on? So Abby captures these realities through her surprising opening lines. She also does so through really funny, quippy asides and notes. In her poem, "Dear Lover of Lady Poverty," she writes, "When you broke with the world, you gave up jerkins and boots, parentheses, Italian leather, no less." So she has all kinds of really, really intelligent and sensitive ways of capturing the reality of things in her poems. She also is a great user of the conceit. If you haven't read any John Donne or George Herbert lately, a conceit is a metaphor extended across a poem, and I really suggest that you look at her Habitation of Wonder collection and the beautiful Make Me poems, Make Me River, Red-tailed Hawk, Sheet Moss. So Abby's poems, I think, help draw us as readers into a contemplative experience. We get to see the reality of the experiences and objects that she describes. She awakens in us an awareness of what God is doing and how God is revealed in the world around us. Reading Abby's poems, I have found, cultivates in me an openness to God and God's work in and through the world. I was thinking about beauty as a witness. And I think sometimes in our current age, beauty is the best witness to the full abundance of the divine life. And Elizabeth Bishop has this lovely poem, The Filling Station, that enumerates beauty found in a surprising place. And she ends the poem by saying, somebody loves us all. And I find that when I read Abby's work, I am struck again by the fact that somebody does love us all. So would you welcome with me, Abby Carroll?
Thank you so very much. I'm humbled, I'm honored, I'm delighted to be here at Gordon College. This is my first time at Gordon. This is a special school. You go to a very special school. And I've really enjoyed my conversations with a few of you and my opportunity to be in a few classes. I want to, as you know, the title of this reading is Habitation of Wonder, Tenanting Beauty, Imagining Justice. And I'd like to dive right in with a poem, and it's called Beaver. And Jesus says, consider the lilies of the fields, look at the birds of the air. Jesus presents to us an act of noticing creation as a spiritual practice. Now, certainly, these words of Jesus, consider the lilies of the field, look at the birds of the air, they are about more than beauty, but I would say they are not about less than beauty. When I was quite young, I found myself in a canoe with my dad. My dad is a naturalist, a retired professor from UNH in environmental conservation. I thought that my dad knew everything that there is to know about the created world, about the natural world, about nature. But there was someone else with us, someone who was older than my dad, a mentor of my dad, someone my dad looked up to. If I looked up to my dad who knew everything, I was doubly humbled that my dad had to look up to somebody, which meant that somehow there was even more to this world than my dad knew. In the canoe, it was dusk. We canoed in silence. We listened. We noticed. And this poem is about that experience. Beaver. In the company of my father, and one older than my father, who taught him what it means to listen, I sat on a nylon foam cushion, tucked tight in the orange vest that padded me safe for the going out into evening. And the mallard pond, all duckweed and singing with a swoop of blackbirds bending marsh grass, where we tossed bread crusts Sundays after church, hoping for swans, slowed on the exhale of day. And we made our way up the dark watered river, soundless, except for the paddle's dip and drip, pause, drip, pause, drip. Bats fastly cutting the tawny sky. And the arc of the boat, within the arc of the breezeless near night, held us. And what might have been turtle heads poked through and disappeared. I was sure of eyes staring us down from the forested bank, 1,000 or more. And the sideways branches of a downed tree became a country of lines that surely mapped a home for some breathing thing I couldn't see or name, till every angled line erased into owl echoing dusk. And then, above the pines, the moon, and with it, a water trail, silver and rippled, and we did not speak. Not my father, not the one older than my father, not me. And the trail was a sign. And the sign was a crossing into a kingdom not ours. And we knew it by the brash, flat clap of the beaver tail, its singular percussion against the breezeless still, announcing who and who did not belong. And I gasped equally at the argument of it and the delight, as if we had dared the weedy world from which we came to take us back in. And we floated for a moment on that holy in-between. Thank you. Oops. So my sister and I, when we were little, we played in the woods behind our house. There's a sort of field and then just woods. And right at the threshold of the woods was a rock. And it just looked like a hearth to us. And so we liked to play home in this rock, which was kind of at the edge of the wilderness. And I'd like to read a poem. It's called Habitation of Wonder, which is also the title of this book, my second book of poems. Now, the term habitation of wonder, it's both a reference to this rock, and it's also a reference to the world that we live in, this habitation of wonder. What is wonder? Have you ever thought about that? What is wonder? Well, and let me see if I can get here. Now, I can't see the slide, so I'm pressing the arrow button. Oh, maybe I need to press that one. No. Is there a way to know how to move the slides? That would be great. Thanks.
There we go.
Okay, great. So let's see. Oh, I see. That's how I know where we are. Okay, wonder. So here's one. This is not a formal definition of wonder. This is, as a poet, I'm less into formal definitions than ways of thinking about things. This is a way of thinking about wonder, a posture of the soul that makes room in us for beauty. A posture of the soul that makes room in us for beauty. I want to submit to you two ingredients that I see in wonder. Now, one of them is uncertainty. It's uncertainty, but the other one is safety. Uncertainty in the presence of danger, that leads to fear. That's an occasion for fear. Uncertainty in the context of safety, that can become an occasion for curiosity and awe. In many ways, as a poet, I see my vocation as stewarding wonder. This is a quote by G.K. Chesterton, and it's very much a mantra for me as a poet. The dignity of the artist lies in his duty of keeping awake the sense of wonder in this world. Habitation of wonder. And the granite was ours. Its rippled grain cool under our hands. And the granite was a home, a compass to a home, the habitation of our wonder. And the squirrels looked down from the rough pines. Ours was the birch and the maple, the leaves and the interstices between the leaves. Through them peered a blue so calm, so water-like, it might have been left over from the birth of the world. And the wind went about its languages above us, and the wind held our secrets in its giant open ear. Ours were arrangements of lichen, moss, stone. We read them like braille, our fingers light and kneading the edges of things. And the damp bled through our coats, and the damp was toadstools and ink caps asserting their theories of time. Ours was time. We stayed till a distant windowed glow pierced the scrim of dusk, and the rock sang us its shadow. And the rock was our domesticity, and the rock was all we knew. Thanks. Do we have any Madeleine L'Engle fans out here today? A few Madeleine L'Engle fans? Madeline L'Engle says this in her book, A Circle of Quiet. It is through the world of imagination, which takes us beyond the restrictions of provable fact, that we touch the hem of truth. What is the relationship between imagination and truth? A few of us were discussing that in a class this morning. To me, Madeline L'Engle is an imagination hero because her exquisite, daring, holy imagination helps me to grow in mine. Do you have an imagination hero? Somebody whose imagination gives you permission to imagine things you wouldn't otherwise imagine. I read her book, by the way, Walking on Water. That was the book that really opened up the world for me, the world of imagination, the world of using the imagination in the service of truth. The next poem I want to read is called Genesis. And in this poem, I use my imagination as a tool for better understanding the beginning of the world. Now, I'd always pictured kind of inherited, I don't know, this sort of unimaginative vision of the creation of the universe as God speaking a sentence and then another sentence and then another sentence. It sounds like maybe a low-voiced film actor, very serious, just this like kind of, I don't know where this comes from. And then I began to wonder. When I was little, I used to hum whenever I brushed my teeth. And I didn't realize it until the babysitter started noticing it and mentioning it and smiling and being amused and pointing out that I hummed every time I brushed my teeth. I mean, when I was really little. And I began to wonder if maybe Genesis, the genesis of the world, looked and sounded a little less like a low-voiced film narrator than my 3 or 4-year-old self standing in front of the bathroom mirror, humming for the joy of being alive and unable to contain that joy or keep it to myself. So, Genesis. Oops, wrong. We read the word spoke forth creation, but I'm not so sure it wasn't sung into being. Not exactly hummed, though insects might have appeared with hardly an opening of the mouth. No doubt the sun was spun from delicate yet forceful arias, thus the operatic nature of light. Out of a bass line, deep blue tones, the kind you rarely hear until they faded into air. Whales. Ostriches sprang from strange improvisations. Elephants are echoes of ancient sacred chants. I imagine larkspur, phlox, and clover are the progeny of nursery rhymes, repeated quaintly, readily, musingly, as if sheer gratuity were their purpose, as if they were made for nothing more than loveliness. Stars, in their totality, emerge not from a tune, but rather a soft and knowing sound, a buzz, a kind of celestial purr, a note so perfectly content with itself that it sparked, became what it dreamed, a universe. Thank you. Well, I'd like to read another poem, a second poem called Genesis. And this poem doesn't explore the creation of the universe, it explores the creation of my own being, which is its own genesis. Each one of us is a genesis, right? And so I take my inspiration for this poem from 2 places. One, perhaps a familiar one, Psalm 139. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. So that is the initial inspiration for this poem, but there's a secondary inspiration, and it's a poem by John Updike, whose name came up, I think, in a class this afternoon that I was in. John Updike wrote a poem called 7 Stanzas at Easter, and it is a celebration of the resurrection, but specifically he celebrates the resurrection of Christ through an exploration of what the implication of that was on a biological level, using anatomical language. Here's the opening of his poem. Make no mistake, if he rose at all, it was as his body. If the cell's dissolution did not reverse, the molecules reknit, the amino acids rekindle, the church will fall. So in my poem, I wanted to affirm and explore the truth of Psalm 139, but to do so with a similar lens that Updike uses, drawing on biological imagery and vocabulary, but still with a poetic voice. And at the end of this poem, this poem is asking, what makes humans set apart as made in the image of God? What makes us set apart? And the poem answers with essentially a question. Could it be that what sets us apart is our God-given draw to beauty? Could this be God's ultimate signature on his invention of the human being? Genesis. Before light was mine, and the air that sways the wheat fields and clover filled the O-sacs of my lungs, you plucked a harvest of stars from the universe of my mother's womb. Those shining, singing things called cells, sewed them into nodes and valves, follicles, ossicles, auricles, ducts, hinged humerus to radius, stitched iris to retina, cornea to macula, then attached the palpebra. You invented my appendix, my gallbladder, my epiglottis, my spleen, all manner of fascia and humor and gland, took pleasure in the particular placement of the atlas, the jaw-like pedestal of my cranium, that membraned chamber of ganglia and nerve, dark factory of thought. And here is where you signed your name, laid claim to this tight constellation of salts, this breathing, ticking scaffold of dreams. Not in terms of lobule, lymph, ligament, or vein did you leave your mark, but rather this, an affinity for zinnias, for swallows and plums, and questions about the lives of ferns. Isaiah the prophet says this, we are the clay, you are the potter. We are all the work of your hands. I want to invite you to think about a chalice. Think about a chalice. Think about whatever is the shape of the chalice that comes to mind. Notice the shape of it, the material of it, any ornamentation or decoration, a collar perhaps. What do you picture? A chalice, of course, is a carefully crafted, often ornate, though sometimes quite simple, vessel for holding wine as part of the Eucharist, and it is an object of beauty. And yet it is a vessel for holding what represents the blood of Christ, the ultimate suffering, the ultimate grief. The image of a chalice raises for me the question, what is the relationship between beauty and suffering? A number of years ago, I experienced a season of lament. And I wrote a series of poems, which Carolyn referred to, poems that start with the term make me. Each one is a prayer addressed to God. Make me river, make me willow, make me red-tailed hawk. I wanted God to help me lament. I couldn't enter lament. And you know, there's no way around lament. You just have to go through it. And I couldn't seem to enter into that valley Poetry became a door for me to do that. It gave me a vocabulary to pray prayers that I couldn't otherwise pray. And so these poems are all asking God, help me to lament. And they're doing it with metaphor. In this case, the metaphor of a chalice. And so this is called Make Me Chalice. Make me chalice, bowl of tears and wine. Mold me, valley deep. Make curve the earth you wedge, pinch, lute, glaze, coil, shape. Oh, make me open palm, vessel of praise and doubt, basin of dusk. Carve wide the lip, form broad the hull, O Lord of clay. Make room for rain, make room for song. And I will be the moon which holds the sun and pours it forth. And I will be the well that Jacob built. Oh, hallow me. Oh, make me yours to fill, to lift, to bless, to spill. And I will be decanted. Yes, and I will be refilled. Thanks. Well, I am not a formal student of justice. Perhaps some of you are formal students of justice. But as a poet, I am a wanderer. I want to invite you to wonder with me for a moment about justice, to enter into an imagining of justice. And I'd like to read 5 short poems from my book, Cup My Days Like Water. Each of the poems in this book, I started with Psalm 1 and went through Psalm 75. I read the psalm in many translations, and I let the words just steep until a phrase, an image, rose to the surface in my imagination, and I let that be a seed for a poem, a prayer, a psalm. All of these poems really are prayers or psalms. And so what I'm going to do as I read these is to start with the verse, and then the title, and then the body of the poem. In many cases, the title and the first line are the same. I want to read a quote first, though. Christian artist and organizer Anaelsi Velasco Sanchez says this: "Justice begins with radical imagination." Justice begins with radical imagination. And so each of these poems is a poetic imagining of justice. When we write about justice, we're not just writing about justice, we're doing the work of justice, if indeed justice requires imagination, right? Okay. Okay. So I'll read 5. You can, if you choose to apply, I'll let you know when. Like this is like the symphony where there's like a adagio, and then there's the the different parts. So 5 poems there is sweet. Okay. This one starts with: May the Lord silence all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. Psalm 12, verse 3. May the blousy scent of lilacs. May the blousy scent of lilacs opening in spring silence empires of lies. May infants babbling against their mothers' chests prophesy. May a single drop of rain on the cheek of the fabulist, the fraud, cause a chance looking up. May night canticle what is true over the sleeping dreams of a slander-weary land. May a radish seed outdo the proud, the big-mouthed, all-manglers of facts. Yes, may the smooth-tongued suddenly forget their words, unlearn speech. May mute fish sing. Open your eyes, my God. Hear my plea for justice once and for all. Psalm 7, verse 6. Justice is a song on the lips. Justice is a song on the lips of the hosed down, the spat on, the stolen from, the falsely named. And what is a song but a rising up like fire of what is true, a prophetic hymn? A song is stronger than bars, lives longer than lies, holds its own against stark offices of hate. No weapon formed against it can stand. Even spilled blood sings. Psalm 58:2. You plot injustice in your hearts. You spread violence throughout the land. Imprecation. Let their sleep be plagued by light. Don't bother breaking their teeth, Lord, just their pride. May they lose face like Saul lost his sight. No need to melt them like wax, just singe the hem of their lust. Acquaint them with dirt. Let them thirst. Prick them with the spiny burr of truth. Turn their trophies to dust. Uncrown the dazzle of their youth. Feed them the laughter of the poor. Careen them. Let them find out what praying is for. Psalm 13, verse 1, how long, O Lord? How long? How long till borders vanish from the map? Highway signs flashing DUI deaths instead announce sightings of rare birds in both English and Latin names. How long till earthquakes cease? Phone alerts report not a missing child, but sticky hand sisters with bannered stand selling lemonade. How long till lies become extinct? All running water sings clean. Hospitals are converted into art museums. How long till nothing's left for the evening news but the naming of stars, the tracking of wild guerrilla clans, school kids hammering boats out of bomber drones? How long till we see the dream sleeping in our bones? Oh, tell me, how long till spring? Psalm 37, verse 11. The meek will inherit the land. The meek will inherit the land. Who takes concern for others more than self? Who takes concern for others more than self? She will preside over oaks and podiums and choices made under high dome. Who hoards not but seeks to share? He will govern prairie and street, hold the keys to streams, museums, and every hidden vault. Who refuses to lift her voice in blame? She will helm oceans, hold court with lions, ordain a feast for the scammed, the trampled, the erased. Thanks. Thanks. The next poem I'd like to read is called What is Love But a Fire, a Burning Not Consumed? I've been thinking about fire lately. Fire is an image that is often associated, perhaps, with justice, especially in the popular Christian imagination. It can be associated with punishment. But I've been sitting with a question lately. What if instead of understanding the fire of judgment as punishment, I understood it as love? We read a poetic description of fire in the Song of Songs. Love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. Here we have a picture of love as eternal and as a fire. One day, within the past year, I had taken in the news of the day, and it was fearful. It was a fearsome news, and it was just accumulating on top of a lot of news that really became a kind of toxicity in me. I was saturated with news that led to almost a soul kind of a panic, like a fear. And I knew I needed to deal with that, to do something. And I went for a walk, one of my favorite places, a farm with a dirt road that leads down to this pond. And I sat at this pond and I watched the light change. I watched the creatures that appeared and disappeared. And I let that place speak a word of beauty over the fear in me, and it did. In fact, it did so completely, and it happened so distinctly that it was almost as if there was a moment where I could feel the lift of the weight of the fear, the disappearance, the diminishment. And that change within me, it felt prophetic. Like maybe that's a picture of what will one day be true of this world at large. And so this poem is kind of about that experience, but also the prophetic nature of it. It's called What is Love But a Fire, a Burning Not Consumed? Short little poem. I walked the road to where the pond became a crucible of light, the slow lives of turtles turning into a room, and a mink let me follow it with my eyes into a curtain of reeds in the middle of a world within the world, and the tinny radio blather wedged in my mind like so much kindling for the end of things gave way to water dazzling the blue truth of sky. Hot fear, now ash on the breeze, as one day every obstacle to love will be. May it be so. Thank you. Let's see here, back to my notes. Okay. How many of you know that beauty is often found in very surprising places? I was having significant car troubles a number of years ago. I found myself at the auto repair. I was sitting in the dingy little waiting room. You know, there you could hear everything. You could hear the clank of the metal. You could hear the drills. You could hear the salty jokes of the mechanics. Is not a place I enjoy spending time generally at all. But in this moment, I had the deepest of gratitudes for some reason I can't explain. Actually, I probably can partially, which was that my car was not feeling very safe. And I felt as though these people are saving my life by making my car safe. And there was a surprising reverence that kind of welled up in me. I did feel like God himself was at work through the mechanics in providing for my safety. And the desire in me rose up to wax eloquent about it. And so I wrote a poem. And it is in the spirit of Gerard Manley Hopkins. Anyone familiar with Gerard Manley Hopkins? He was a Christian poet and wrote a lot of sonnets, among other things. So this is a sonnet, and it is inspired directly by his very famous poem, Pied Beauty. So here's the beginning of Hopkins' poem. Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of coupled color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-cold chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plow, and all trades, their gear and trackle and trim. That's the beginning of his poem. This poem that I'm about to read is called Reading Hopkins at the Auto Repair. Let's see. also a sonnet. Glory be to God for oil-stained hands, creased black with work, for shirts stained thick with grease, for wrenches, chargers, filters, hoists, and jacks, and all who wield them, use them, run them, fix the ills of motors, axles, starters, belts, with method, art, dexterity, and grace. For springs replaced, transmission fluid changed, whatever coils and hoses patched or spliced, whatever leaks repaired, such holy work. He sees to bolts, who also sees to souls. Praise him. Okay. Yes, another fun poem. Really, this is probably the poem. If you ask me what was the funnest poem that you ever wrote, it probably would be this one. So a few years ago, it was a gorgeous spring day in Vermont, walking a dirt road, that first verdant green. I was having a hard time believing that I wasn't in heaven. And then I saw the glare of some aluminum beer cans on the side of the road, and it just felt like a travesty, just sort of poisoning the whole scene. And I thought to myself, I should pick up those beer cans. I should do the right thing and pick them up. But I really didn't want to carry beer cans on the way home. And so I was like, it's not really going to change it's not going to help things. It's not going to solve the environmental crisis. I could just leave them there. And then this question came to me that really surprised me. What is the beautiful thing to do? I could not argue with the answer to that question. The beautiful thing to do would be to pick up those beer cans and to tell that story. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Let your light shine before others, that they might see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." I'm not a Greek scholar, but from my research, I've learned that the word for good here, in terms of good deeds, is kalos. And that word can also be translated as beautiful. Not that that's how we should read this verse, but I suggest this as a layering to reading this verse. And so I do want to give us the option just to read it that way for purposes of appreciating the possibilities. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your beautiful deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And so this next poem, you could say, is in some ways about doing good deeds. But actually, I would argue that it's a poem that is about doing beautiful deeds and letting the beauty of those deeds be prophetic. This is called, and I stole this from another poet who has a poem of the same title, "How to Prepare for the Second Coming." Brad Davis is the other poet. I am a big proponent of theft, literary theft, not plagiarism, literary theft. Sorry, here we go. Where is this poem? I didn't mark this one. Here we go. How to prepare for the second coming. Start by recalling the absolute goodness of rain and repent for every grumble you have ever made about the weather. This will take approximately forever. Next, you will want to commit a theft. With deft lock-picking and a shrewd hand, steal back the hours you fed to the hungry god of work. Then squander them on hydrangeas, Wordsworth, voluntary sidewalk repair. Teach a child to lace a shoe. Your child or another's, any 4-year-old will do. And while you're at it, set the alarm for 3 and fumble through the dark to the pond to guard the salamanders as they cross the road. If, having accomplished these tasks, you wish to go on, sit at your desk and carefully design a few radical acts of grace, by which I mean murder of a sort. You must willfully, passionately kill the living, breathing debt owed you by those who stole your goods, your rights, or the jewel that was the beating muscle of your hope. Apart from this, you cannot know the full extent of love. For precedent, refer to the cross. Thrust your nails into dirt and plant a few seeds, carrots, radishes, chives. Indeed, get scandalously intimate with the earth. After all, it is where you will live when the lamb lies down with the lion and the lion has become your friend. And when the water of the new world breaks, all is said and done, heaven and earth made one, as the prophets foretold. You will lose each doubt to a song, which is a kind of praise, and reap the good you sowed. Thanks. Just a couple more. Philippians 4. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable, right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about such things that are excellent and worthy of praise. I share with you also the Message paraphrase of that. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly. Things to praise, not things to curse. A number of years ago, I had a debilitating chronic fatigue. It lasted for several years. There were so many questions. There were so many disappointments. There was so many limitations. There were so many fears. And I gave my mind, I gave myself to those for a long time. Spent a lot of time thinking about them. And one afternoon, I felt compelled to take a break from thinking about all that was hard, confusing, and dark. And instead to intentionally, as a spiritual practice, focus on the goodness to come, the goodness and the beauty that I would one day call home when I inhabit the new heavens and the new earth, fully healed. And so out of that experience, I wrote a poem that I'd like to read to you, and I wrote it as a spiritual practice, as a stepping into a faith that this is indeed what I believe, and this is indeed what is true for my future. I address this poem to myself as a sort of speaking over myself, what I know to be true. But I hope you will hear this poem as written for you, because it's not just for me. It is for all who long to tenant the beauty that God has for us when his redemption of our broken world is complete. This is a poem that I started writing and it just kept flowing. It's called Inheritance. In the end, the light will be yours. You will wear it like a song. No longer will the small instrument of your heart click its private music in the dark. Each note will explode into white, wind-swirled blossoms of desire. You will enter a vast country, unbounded by words, the kind you have visited in dreams. Here, air and light are the language you speak. When you arrive, you will be known the way, since you are a child, the moss at the water's edge has honored the curved press of your feet, measured the weight of your days. The oak at the bend in the brook, the slow-moving river of your years. All your tears have prepared you for this. A now that has ousted after and if and then. A geography unhindered by time. A new kind of green. An unforeseen fellowship with the finches, the pines. and entering into their song, a longing so full, so intricate and free, it has become the continent in which you live. You will forgive the dark. Understand that every work of art has been a map, every summer dusk a call, milkweed soft and hardly there. Now you can hear what never could be heard before. Day opening up into day, the blue pool of the sky brimming over like a promise, wind covenanting with the clouds, courting the yellow-feathered birds. Your hands will shape objects out of ideas. Your feet not just walk, but walk toward, devoting themselves over and over again to the earth, larkspur lilting like psalms across your path. At once you will stop. Ponder the wonder of the tongue, the willing hum of bees, how they zip and hover and never sleep, how one day, unknowing, you were born, became who you are, a breath, a stem, a leaf in the wind, how the wind gifted you with shape, whittled you into the image of your name, how your name became a wild and shimmering field of asters. Day after day, you have wandered its tousled edges, listened to the distant grasses list and bow their foreign praises. Morning gives way to evening, evening to morning. Your fingers spin offerings of prose out of that endless, star-pierced turning. This the constellations have taught you. The heart was made for light. You have seen it in the silver flash of a fish, the shiver of a dancer's rippled sash. You have touched it, the hem of the sun, and lived. And ever since, your breathing has been a gentle waiting, a pilgrim's slow and barefoot journeying. Radiance is filling the temple of your bones, fitting you for the bright orchard of its kingdom. Branches are bending themselves into a dwelling. Thanks. Well, I'm going to close with a suite of two more poems, and then that will be it for my part. But I want to share a quote that has been very meaningful for me from Russ Ramsey in his book Rembrandt is in the Wind. He says this: "We have a theological responsibility to deliberately and regularly engage with beauty. When we neglect beauty, we neglect one of the primary qualities of God. Indeed, is it not true that God is the source of all beauty? And if he is the source of all beauty, the beautiful one, then could it also be that the deeper our capacity is to behold beauty, the deeper our capacity will be to behold God? Could beauty be a rehearsal?" So the two poems that I will end with are Psalm and Creed. So I grew up saying the Nicene Creed in church every Sunday. It has gotten in my bones. It is no longer part of the liturgical tradition in the church that I go to and pastor in. But it is part of my personal devotions. It grounds me. It is my daily declaration of faith. So the poem that I'm about to read, called Creed, is not by any means meant to be an alternative to the Orthodox creeds. It's meant to be my personal supplement to the creeds, if that makes sense. In other words, I believe in God the Father, the Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, of all things seen and unseen. And here's what I also believe. But before I read that, I want to read a poem called Psalm, which is a praise poem. And it is essentially just a list of names that I came up with for God, each one exploring the beauty of our God through the creative act of naming him. So I'll read Psalm, and then I will read Creed, and I'll read them as a suite of two poems. Psalm. Praise to the weaver of symmetries, sustainer of stars and all harmonies, inventor of light and its subtleties, designer of souls and anatomies. Praise to the weigher of gravities, author of oceans and mysteries, director of blood's circularities, adjuster of winds and proximities. Praise to the sculptor of galaxies, prober of hearts and all certainties, tuner of cells and their frequencies, conductor of night's musicalities. Praise to the wounder of enmities, mender of losses and maladies, defeater of earthly hostilities, repairer of torn mutualities. Praise to the coiner of poetries, lover of love and its currencies, confounder of death and its secrecies, redeemer of dust and infinities. Creed. I believe in the life of the word, the diplomacy of food. I believe in salt-thick ancient seas and the absoluteness of blue. A poem is an ark, a suitcase in which to pack the universe. I believe in the universality of art, of human thirst for a place. I believe in Adam's work of naming breath and weather, all manner of wind and stillness, humidity and heat. I believe in the audacity of light, the patience of cedars, the innocence of weeds. I believe in apologies, soliloquies, speaking in tongues, the underwater operas of whales, the secret prayer rituals of bees. As for miracles, the perfection of cells, the integrity of wings, I believe. Bones know the dust from which they come. All music spins through space on just a breath. I believe in that grand economy of love that counts the tiny death of every fern and white-tailed fox. I believe in the healing ministry of flocks, the holy brokenness of saints, the fortuity of faults, of making and then redeeming mistakes. Who dares brush off the auguries of a storm, disdain the lilting eulogies of the moon? To dance is nothing less than an act of faith in what the prophets sang. I believe in the genius of children and the goodness of sleep, the eternal impulse to create. For love of God and the human race, I believe in the elegance of insects, the imminence of winter, the free enterprise of grace. Thank you.
Stay. Abby, thank you so much. That was such a rich time. We have a little bit of time for Q&A. So Lauren and Dr. Brink will have mics. So if you have a question about one of the poems, about anything Abby's shared as part of this talk, now is your chance. I feel like it's very different to ask questions after poems,
Yes,
as opposed to ideas.
Thank you so much. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about the role of lament and how poetry, you mentioned a little bit of how poetry offered for you a doorway into lament, and maybe could you expand on that a little bit?
That is a wonderful question. Thank you so much for that question. Lament is something, first of all, I lament that there isn't enough emphasis, I think, on lament in the church, as I think perhaps historically there has been, or that there sometimes is in other cultures, as if we just all need to be okay all the time. No, we need to lament. The Psalms teach us that. Jesus laments, right? It's so biblical. But lament is hard, and sometimes we need a way to lament, right? And art provides that. Our music, how many of you have like listened to a sad song when you were going through a hard time, and it helped you. It helps you by helping you get sad, to be in touch with the sadness inside you that you needed to be in touch with in order to move on. And so I want to say that I think what has been powerful for me in writing the poems of lament that I did, was choosing a metaphor. I chose the metaphor of chalice in that poem. And that, when you write, you don't know where it's going necessarily. Writing is an act of faith, and so I started with, I don't know, I just like this image of a chalice. I feel like there's something there to explore. And I'll step back and say the first lament poem I wrote was "Make Me Willow." So willow tree is historically a symbol of lament. And I thought, well, I don't know why it's a symbol of lament, but I just want to explore that. And as I started to say, make me willow, help me to like bend, help me to brush I can't remember the words, but brush my hair to the earth. Like I realized it's like I was using language that was showing me what was going on in my soul and what my soul needed. But it was through the metaphor, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I just want to say something about poetry and prayer, if I may, which is that I think that writing a poem as a prayer, if you're inclined to, can help you access a prayer that might be deeper in you than you would if you just pray the way you usually pray. Does that make sense? And that's true for other forms of art. And so that's what those poems did for me. And I think we need art to help us lament. So thanks for asking.
Thank you. I've noticed that a few of your poems turn on the word sing, something surprising, suddenly singing. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to music and poetry.
Oh, where to take that? There's so many places. Well, first of all, poetry is a form of music. I was reading the scriptures the other day, and there's a verse about singing to the Lord, and I was realizing that actually when I write poetry, I think I am doing that, or when I'm reading poetry. So there is the musicality, and that's a huge part of poetry itself. Let me say another thing that I think is similar between poems and songs. You can't rush either of them. Same with prayer, right? You cannot rush it. It's not really, obviously, right, in an emergency, you shout, and then you act, right? But I mean, in general, you don't rush a prayer. You don't rush a song. You don't rush a poem. It is a form in which you can be still. It slows us down. We need that spiritually, and that is where encounter can happen with our own souls and with God. And sometimes the encounter with God is by meeting him in our soul or through our soul. Does that make sense? And I've noticed that too about song, and I can't really explain that because I think all of us, if you do enough art in whatever genre you're working in, you're going to see patterns. And that pattern reflected back to you tells you something about who you are and what's inside you. Yeah.
What I'm curious about, I don't really know how to ask this, but like, where do your poems come from, and how do we cultivate that awakeness to the beauty of the world that you were talking about in our lives?
Thank you. Such a great question. I wish I knew the answer in terms of how do we cultivate. I think there are many ways, and we all have to find our own way, to some extent. That said, the act of writing poetry for me is the act of slowing. And if I didn't write the poetry, I wouldn't be slowing down in the way that I am because I'm writing the poem. So when I write a poem, even if it doesn't end up being read by anybody, even if it doesn't get published, there's the value in the spiritual practice of it, if that makes sense. Some people, that might be journaling. And journaling doesn't have to just be a reflection on your day-to-day, your life. You could just sit at the pond and journal what you see, just list it. You will look back on your day, and I think you will recognize that was a rich moment in your day, even if you can't justify it in the moment, like this is special. I think you'll look back on your day and say that was a moment of noticing. There was something rich there. And of course, when we're noticing God's creation, that is only edifying and good for our souls, and instructive as well. Where do my poems come from? That's also a big question, but I will just say that one of the things that I spoke about this in class that I do as a poet is I constantly read and imitate the voices of who I'm reading. I try on their voices. Just like I said for that poem, How to Prepare for the Second Coming. I would never dare write a poem with that title or pretend to know how to prepare, or let alone tell you how to prepare for the second coming, right? But there's a poem that I read that had that title, and I didn't love the poem, but I loved the title. And so I was like, what would my poem with that title be? And then I tried on that voice, and I ended up with a poem that is more original than I think I would have otherwise. And so constantly letting my creativity be nourished by the creativity of others. The other last thing I'll say is writing in community is part of that too. So being a part of a writing group or a class, or just having a partner that you share work with is something that just gives you a structure to like keep writing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and lastly, scripture, because I did that like with the Psalms, like when I talked about imitating scripture. Why not let scripture be the beginning of a poem or any kind of art?
Before you answer this one, I just want to say that Professor Kirkham and I think completely independently came up with the same activity using Abby's poems, which is to take her make me poems and then invite people to imitate them. And I said, take an object from the natural world that captures your attention, wonder about it for a while, right? Look at it, pay attention to it. What about it attracts you? And then write a prayer modeled on one of Abby's poems. And then I think Nora did. If you were in Professor Kirkham's Correlate class, you might have done the same thing today, but we came to that separately. So there's also an offering for any of you who are really enjoying these poems.
We're stealing from you as well. Yeah. That's as it should be.
I really liked what you were saying about process, like kind of the process of writing over necessarily what the product of it is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. And it kind of ties in when you do, because, and I don't want to speak, but it seems like, do you tend to write more free verse poetry, like free verse, would you say, or do you write more form poetry?
No, I don't write a lot of formal poetry. I tend to do free verse, but occasionally it's really fun to try a sonnet or something.
Yeah,
like that.
when you do kind of have an inclination to write form poetry, is there something in particular, like maybe like drawing or trying on someone else's style, but does it shift your writing process at all, like the way in which you write, and also like does it shift how you notice things when you're kind of, I don't want to use the word, but like bound to a form?
I think that there's the form and the musicality want to have an interplay. So if I'm trying a form, often that it's creating certain spaces for the musicality to happen in ways that it wouldn't otherwise, or that in more free verse, it's just more of a free for all. And so there is a bit of a game when trying to like write a form, or in really imitating anything. There's like a game component, and that's really fun. And I think that that's actually a wonderful way to write is to start off, like, let it be a game, let it be an experiment, let it be silly if that's where it needs to start. Yeah.
Walking very slowly, guys. Would you thank Abby one more time with me?